All right. So, in summary, want to wrap up the content generation section by just going back over the points that we talked about. So, number one, we talked about creating dedicated article pages. This can be great for when you have a very specific idea for what you're going to include in your article, or maybe you have a very regimented sort of writing process where you're writing like a dedicated newsletter every single week. Creating a dedicated page in those instances can be a great way to do that. We talked about building those articles out with block references, so pulling those block references in throughout your graph. We talked about the benefit of having written all of those notes in your own words ahead of time, and how essentially at that point it almost becomes just like knowledge Legos. Like you're able to just sort of drag things in and build your blog posts from pre-existing notes within your graph. This is one of the great things about Roam. We talked about the use of replace with text and alias, so the ability to preserve those block references while still editing the text to make it fit within the specific context of the blog post that you're working on. From there, we talked about exporting to Markdown. That's a great format to use for most editors and online publishing platforms. Many of them will accept that. We also talked about tracking articles. So the idea that as you're creating more and more writing within your graph, you sort of need ways to track all of these. We talked about various methods that you can use to do that, including using linked references, using a query-based method, or my personal favorite, just building a manual pipeline based on various different stages and manually tracking it within your graph, but showed you a few different methods for doing that. We talked about using block focus. So if you want to do more of your writing on one page, but you want to be able to zoom in and focus on an individual block to remove visual distractions, how you can do that. And then lastly, we talked about using dedicated drafting pages. So I think, again, a great way to get started and cut through some of the complexity and just have a space where you can do a whole bunch of writing in one place and avoid sort of needlessly complex setups within your Roam graph. So hopefully you found this section helpful. I think with Roam, one of the great things about it is that it is so powerful. But if you're not sort of deliberate about getting in and just really focusing on putting together like a streamlined content generation or writing process, it can very, very easily turn into sort of graph for graph's sake, or just taking notes just to take notes. So hopefully this helped give you some ideas about how you can actually use Roam, not just to take more notes and kind of build up more of your own thoughts, but to actually produce more output.